Hey guys, welcome back here to Advanced Bass Fishing, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check out today's episode. Guys, today we're going to be talking about how bass feel about bright sun. You know, these days like today, not a cloud in the sky, when the sun's out, how do they react to it? You know, what's their, mood and personality around a bright sun? And it's going to surprise you guys because it's all over the place. And I want to talk about the different factors and how bass react to it, and even more importantly is how to catch bass, when the sun's bright at different times of the year. So we'll get that in today's video here. Also, guys, real quick, before we get started here, thank you very much for everybody that has been using and bookmarking my tackle warehouse link for your tackle purchases, guys. I know you're tired of hearing about that. Big way to support the channel, guys, is just to use my tackle warehouse link in every video description if you need some tackle or rod and reels. That really helps the channel out a lot. Much appreciated. And also, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, all you have to do is go to my Facebook page, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blaukat, and shoot me a private message, and I'll get you the details for that, so appreciate it. Okay, guys, bright sun, what do bass do on bright sunny days? And this is a topic that's all over the place because there is a lot of things that they do, and there's a lot of ways they behave, and there's a lot of baits that they bite, and a lot of it is based upon different times of the year. So in my opinion, from all of my observation in fishing and my study of bass behavior and everything bass does, so much of this, like anything else, it involves your water temperature and your water clarity. You hear me talking about that constantly, guys, in my videos. Water temperature, water clarity, all the time. This is especially important when you're dealing with a bright, sunny, high light intensity day. So I want to sort of go over through the seasons, through the different months of the year, and talk about how bright sun affects bass and sort of what they do a little bit. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the winter time. Any time between like December and, mid to late February. Like right now, we're sort of getting into the tail end of winter a little bit. But anyway, the winter time, when it's a bright, sunny type of a day out, this is when a bright sun or clouds or whatever has the least amount of impact on bass, is when the water's cold, especially if you have a lake where your water temperature gets down in the 40s. One of the things that I have noticed in terms of how bass position and how they bite and the techniques required to catch them, in the winter time of the year, it's not that big of a deal because it just doesn't seem like they're affected that much. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that when it's sunny out, shade can be a key component in bass fishing. And in the winter time of the year, shade is not really a factor as far as positioning for bass. So that's sort of out the window a little bit there. Other factors include the fact that in the wintertime, the bass usually are not quite as shallow, they're deeper, so they're less affected by different types of sunlight conditions. So it doesn't have a lot of play, in my opinion, as far as what the bass do and how they position and everything. Now, this begins to change once that water temperature starts to get into the 50s and 60s. Once the water temperature starts to get in the 50s and 60s, where the bass begin to move a little bit shallower, that is when bright sun, you start noticing an impact that it has on how the fish use cover and how they position around cover. Once you start getting those warmer water temperatures, again, based upon your water clarity, and in terms of when we talk about, bass being, positioning according to shade or sunny conditions out there, most of the time you need to have water visibility of around 3 feet or so before shade becomes a positive factor for the bass to use. If you don't have the water temperatures that warm, and say, for example, if the water's dirtier, the fish aren't going to really relate to shade as much as they do in a little bit cleaner water. But once that water temperature starts to get in the 50s and 60s, the bass will start to seek out shady areas because they're starting to move shallower, and they use it as an ambush point, and they're beginning to feed more. So they're positioning usually in water less than 10 foot deep, and the shade offers them cover, the same as a boat dock or a log or a tree in the water or a grass bed. Shade can be cover just on a bare bank. They actually use it as cover, offers some type of an ambush point. They feel more secure in shade. So a bright sunny day, that time of year, can be really good to start fishing in shade. Now, the other side of the coin here is like when that water temperature starts to get in the 60s and 70s, and you have a lot of bass in the shallowest water that they are all year, because normally when that water temperature is between like 60 and 70 degrees, that is when your bass are going to be the shallowest they are out of 12 months out of the year. In and around that spawning ritual, a lot of bass in less than 5 foot of water on any lake that you go to. And once the fish start getting sort of in that spawn mode a little bit, the sun doesn't bother them whatsoever. Bright sun, even in clear water, does not bother them. You'll see bass when the water temperature is 60 or 70 degrees. I don't care if the water visibility is 10 foot clear. You'll see them cruising down the bank and not even caring about shade. They don't care anything about it. They don't care about being around cover a lot of times. They just are cruising, and they're cruising to they're looking for areas to build beds. They're building beds. They're spawning. They're laying eggs. They're garden fry, and the sun doesn't affect them whatsoever. They don't prefer sun, or they don't prefer shade over sunny areas during that time of year. Now, once that starts to flip around a little bit, and the fish get done spawning, and you start to get into your warmer weather months up until, and this pretty much holds true through summer and fall both. Anytime the water temperature is really over about 70 degrees from about May to October, this is going to hold true what I'm going to talk about to you. That is when bright sunny days are really going to dictate the type of water that the bass use, by far. So say, for example, if you have a bright sunny day and you've got some shade on a bank up until about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the sun gets up so high where it knocks that shade off of the bank, that's a big factor, because those fish are not going to be there, and they're not going to bite near as well as the first couple hours when you have shade, on the water in those type of areas. Another thing was, like on a bright sunny day, once that water temperature gets warmer, the fish are always going to look for shady areas around cover, the darkest places they can find under bright light intensity like this. And that could be whatever cover that you have. That's why bass love aquatic vegetation. It provides a lot of shade from the sun. They love to be around boat docks that provide shade for the sun. And then, to the lesser extent a little bit, lay down wood in the water, different type of rock structures. But once the water temperature starts getting above about 70, 75 degrees, bass really don't like to just hang out on sunny areas with no cover around it. You just don't see them around those type of areas. And that's just sort of like one of those things you can't really explain, because a bass is a sunfish, and they can survive just as fine on, a bright sunny day or a rainy day. They're very adaptable to their environment. But one of the things that you have to understand about bass, there's 3 elements that they need to require. They need to eat, they need to have cover, and that cover is for their own protection and to ambush prey, and they need to spawn. Those are the 3 elements that, are on a bass's mind all the time. So the main thing that you have to do is, on these bright sunny days, is you have to really take note of your water temperature and your water clarity. And then that's going to dictate to you the impact that bright sun has on a fish or not. Now, this is true a lot of times for most species, largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass, on normal man-made impoundments or southern natural lakes. But when you get to the northern tier of the states, and in those big famous smallmouth fisheries like all the Great Lakes, Lake Champlain, Lake St. Clair, all those natural bodies of water that have big smallmouth populations in it, you can throw everything that I just said out the window, because smallmouth, they thrive, and they get out and they'll roam around and they feed heavily, and they don't have to have any cover, and they will bite really good on a sunny day. It's just, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't understand. I don't understand it, but it doesn't make any difference how bright the sun is. I have caught big bags of smallmouth in water between 2 to 20 foot deep. It doesn't really matter how deep it is, on the brightest, high light intensity sunny days that you have ever seen. And in the same situation, if you got largemouth or spotted bass in those areas, you could probably hardly ever get a bite. But I can't count how many days that I fished those big Great Lakes up there, and you'll have a day just like it is right now, where there's not a cloud in the sky, and those smallmouth will be up in 3 or 4 foot of water just on bare, small rock or something like that, and they're not spawning. They're just up there living their life. They're not up there building nests or anything. It doesn't affect them. So that is one sort of like, curveball that it throws you a little bit. But the main thing that, from overall, guys, with the exception of the winter time of the year, the biggest thing that you have to remember when you're fishing on a bright sunny day is that you got to be around some type of shade or cover most of the time. Now, one thing that will sort of like offset that a little bit is a real windy sunny day. If you get a day where the wind's blowing 15 or 20 miles an hour and the sun's really bright out, sometimes it sort of acts like it's cloudy, because the surface disturbance from the wind will actually make those fish feel a little bit more secure, and it tends to get them roaming a little bit more on those sunny days as well. But you can't go wrong, guys, anytime the water temperature is over 50 degrees and you got a day like it is right now, just really try to fish shady areas and areas that have cover that provide shade. That's just going to be where your best bass fishing areas are. So I hope it helps out, guys. We'll talk later.